So our next speaker is a best-selling visionary author, Zoltan Istvan, who has explored over 100 countries, many as a journalist for the National Geographic Channel, writing, filming, and appearing in dozens of television shows. Zoltan is a futurist and a 2016 US presidential candidate for the Transhumanist Party. And I understand, it's my understanding that he's actually polling in 5th place right now. And put that into perspective, so you've got Republican, Democrat, Green Party, Libertarian, and Zoltan. That's quite amazing. So he has been featured on the BBC Radio, NBC, ABC, CBS, Fox, on the Animal Planet, and on its Travel Channel. He is a philosophy and religious studies graduate of Columbia University and resides in San Francisco with his daughter and physician wife. And he's got a great book. I tell you, he just recently published The Transhumanist Wager. It's a novel, it's a bestseller on Amazon. And let's give a great welcome to our next speaker, transhumanist Zoltan Istvan.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for coming to this amazing festival. Wow, when I walked in here and I saw all these people, I was like, this is huge. This must be the largest thing that I've ever seen for life extension advocates. So I'm incredibly happy about that. When I started running for the presidency and forming the Transhumanist Party just about 2 years ago now, there wasn't this yet. There wasn't this excitement. There wasn't so much media. There wasn't so much money. There wasn't so much energy into the transhumanist field or into the life extension field or into the biohacking field or whatever field it is that is getting us to the future quicker. So I am incredibly excited by that fact. And frankly, all of you are to be thanked for that. But there's a huge amount of, I suppose, road left ahead of us, especially because even though our movement is growing dramatically, and even though we are getting closer to living longer and hopefully conquering death, we're not yet there yet. And I would be very, very sad if anyone in this room doesn't get a chance to make it. Because if you can just make it another 15 or 20 years, you're going to get to that point when you might have it unlimited. And that's really the goal of what this conference is about, the festival. This is really the goal of what my party, what my campaign is about, and really the goal of, I think, everyone in this room. When I started 2 years ago, there just wasn't much stuff in the media. And I've made it my point, as many of you know who follow my work, to get into the media. I'm not a scientist. I'm a philosopher, slash popularizer by trade. What I do is I go out and I try to make waves. And some of those waves are controversial. I've done things like drive around in a 40-foot coffin bus that are questionable, makes the movement seem a little bit wacky. But 30 million views later, transhumanism is in people's minds. Transhumanism is something that's being talked about. The fact that you look at a coffin on a road in a far-off, distant little city in Tennessee or something like that makes you wonder what's actually going on. What is to it, this movement? Well, there's a lot to this movement. There's a lot of people, a lot of scientists. There's a lot of, research involved that's changing the way that we are living. The biggest problem, though, with that movement is it's not happening quick enough. And if it doesn't happen more quickly, more people are going to die. For those of you who've read my book, I have this concept called life hours. And for me, it's a very important concept. I try to talk about it a lot because when you take the amount of life hours in this room, the amount of potential life hours in this room, the real goal for me and what I'm trying to do with my presidential candidacy is to try to maximize those life hours, to make them as long as possible. The thing we don't want to do is lose our lives. The things we don't want to do is lose those life hours. The problem is that our government, as you may know, all 535 Congress members, all 8 Supreme Court members, and our president are believing in an afterlife, and therefore they may not see the necessity to live longer. That's a pretty big issue. And so it has a lot to do with why I decided to run for the presidency, is because we need a political front. We need somebody out there, a team out there, a party out there that actually represents us in Washington and says, it's crazy that the culture, it's crazy that 100% of our US government is based on the version that we have this other life coming to us if we can't succeed in this life. And that doesn't work for a lot of life extensionists, especially myself, who's making it a point to try to live as long as possible. There's no way that the government is going to spend the kind of money that we want on anti-aging science unless we can change the culture. And we have to change the culture by getting into the media, by driving crazy buses around, by having festivals like this, and by having scientists come out and say, we're getting closer to conquering death. It's a giant movement. It's a movement that's comprised of many different types of areas, whether it's cyborgism, whether it's cryonics, whether it's biohacking, whether it's transhumanism, whether it's singularitarianism. It doesn't really matter what it is. It's all going to the same point where people have power over themselves, and they especially have power to eliminate death if they want and to remain with their loved ones. Now, my campaign has grown enough in 2 years, surprisingly. I'm excited to report that an iQuanti report came out and put me as essentially in 5th place, behind Jill Stein and Gary Johnson. For some of you who know, I also interviewed with Gary Johnson personally as his vice president. Governor Bill Weld got the role. I was happy to do so, and I do like Gary Johnson. I also like Jill Stein. And I like the idea that third parties in America are making a rise and getting some traction. For me, though, it's not about politics. I'm just a centric person. I don't really care too much if it's this way or that way. All I really care about is that money from the government gets put into science. Our main platform is we need to reduce the military and take that money and put it into life extension science. Right now, 20% of the federal budget is going to defense, to making bombs, to making bullets, to fighting wars in far-off places that probably 99.9% of us are never, ever going to step foot in. And only 2%, if that, is going to science. And of that 2%, a fraction is going to life extension science. That's a tragedy. I don't know how else to say it, but America seems to be deathist. This idea that we accept death in a way where it's something that's normal. It's not normal. There's nothing normal as to a transhumanist. There's nothing normal to someone who's a longevity advocate. Dying is not normal. Science is not normal. What we can do, though, not that it's normal, but what we can do is use this technology and use this science to literally eliminate one by one every disease, to literally reverse aging, to literally make so that we can live perfect, happy lives in perfect bodies, the kinds we want, as long as we want. And that's really the main goal of what I'm trying to do on a daily basis with my campaign. Now, I was just in New York City last night, and next slide. And here I was campaigning at Times Square. It was great because, you know, the day before I was at CNN. Before that, I was at the convention. I was both at the Republican convention and the Democratic convention. I was campaigning and protesting. I had groups of people with me. We had our T-shirts on. I was interviewed with everything from the Young Turks to Playboy to a bunch of other main things, including PBS, NPR, and all these other things. It's the roller coaster is getting bigger for people recognizing that transhumanism, that a campaign, a movement is behind it, that there is a real drive out there to say aging is a problem, aging can be stopped, and there is science out there. And this is the most important thing that I think can happen, in my opinion. I love hearing all the science research. I love hearing all the others, all the amazing technologies that are coming out. But for me, if we don't shift the culture in America, if we don't get it to a point when not every single member in Congress and Supreme Court and our president all believe in this afterlife, if we can't breed a culture that says transhumanism, living indefinitely, using science to overcome the tragedies of life is important, then we're not going to get there. Because the way we can really get there is to get $1 trillion from the government into the life extension field, something like we've never had. If we have that kind of moonshot investment, if we could just get them to believe it, then we will conquer death. In fact, everyone in this room will benefit from that. And that's something that has become the entire platform of what I'm trying to do with my presidential campaign. Now, I have a very unique situation before my time is up here. And Of course, I'm not on the ballots in all states because it takes like $70 million to get on all the ballots. It's crazy how difficult they make it for third parties to actually get voted into the presidency. They say anyone can run for the presidency. It's really not right, as either a new party or an independent needs a huge amount of money, many tens of millions of dollars. However, about 42 states allow on write-in ballots, and most importantly, we are already on the write-in status in Florida and Pennsylvania, and those are two battleground states. And as some of you know, Al Gore and George W. Bush fought it out in Florida, and Al Gore lost by 500 votes. There's a very real chance, come here in November, that my campaign, given 10 or 15,000 votes, which we think we might have, might be able to shift the election one way or the other. Now, I'm not really interested in shifting the election. What I'm interested, though, is using the media to understand that a transhumanist might be able to tilt the direction one way or the other, or even throw my votes. So I've been actually campaigning and reaching out to all the administrations and saying, you know, if you can give me a position in your administration as some type of science advisor or in the cabinet or even a deputy cabinet position, I would do that in order to trade my votes. And if it's a close election, we might come to a point when you'll be seeing on CNN, Fox, and every other network in the world, probably 1 billion views in the end of November, where a transhumanist might be making the difference in who we pick to run our nation. Because I, of course, have no chance to win in 2016, but maybe in 2020, 2024 we will. But we do have a chance to take longevity, life extension research, transhumanism, and put it at the forefront of the media so that a huge amount of people can see it. And the great thing about it is when people see life extension, when they see what anti-aging medicine is, they like it. I haven't met one person who wants to literally just, well, okay, I've met some people that want to die, but most people, if you explain it in a very normal way, like you'll have science and technology to live better, and you don't have to lose your loved ones to cancer and stuff like that, everyone seems to accept it. So there's going to be a moment, hopefully here in a few months, and I hope you'll all see it on TV, when something like that may occur. And if it will, it'll be a great boom for transhumanism and for the longevity movement, because so many people will be exposed to this what we call a radical notion now, but I believe in 10 or 20 years, when aging has probably been stopped, or at least aging has been halted to some extent, it will be a very common notion. And that's very important to try to find that common ground with the American people and with the people worldwide, because what we have, again, is that we have a huge amount of people that probably would sign on to life extension science if they really had just been told it in the right way. But given that we live in this kind of very strict, I suppose, Abrahamic culture, where everything falls into this way and we celebrate Christmas and there's all this death ideas and death perspectives, nobody's really thinking, hey, we can live indefinitely. We should use transhumanism science to conquer the greatest tragedy that we have on Earth. And again, this is why I think come here in a few months, my campaign might make a huge difference if we can just have all the stars align and I could just get to the point when the media sort of falls down, and then we can start spreading those ideas dramatically. There's also another, I think, interesting thing going to be happening. Dan Brown's movie is being made into a blockbuster that actually mentions transhumanism. There's a couple other TV shows going to be coming out next year on transhumanism and life extension science. What's happening here is you're knowing from this festival is that in next year this festival could be twice the size, and after that it could be 10 times the size. The goal here, though, is that all of us need to take a step back and say, which is the best way for us to contribute to start changing the culture, so that when we walk outside, we actually talk to a person. That play in front of us was great, because it was exactly, I talk to people like that all the time, where the person, they just don't hear you when you say you can conquer death, you can eliminate the greatest tragedies that we have on planet Earth. But we can get through them, and we just have to force it through the system. And if you're looking at the trajectory of the transhumanist movement, of the longevity movement, of anti-aging science, it's exploding right now. We have more billionaires than ever that are supporting it, and I'm sure, based on some of my talks with some politicians, Congress people are going to come out very soon and start supporting it. I've been actually even consulting with the US Navy, where that many people are aware that there's going to be this boom in the life extension field very soon. Of course, as Ron had mentioned, there's a lot of ethical debates about it. There's going to be a lot of difficult decisions. As the presidential candidate, I support distributing the life extension science completely in ways that would be very equally. I don't like it when only the 1% would have it. Our Transhumanist Bill of Rights, which we delivered to DC, would insist upon those things. But I think those ethical issues outside of it, the most important goal that we have, and the most important thing that I'm trying to do right now in my campaign, is to raise awareness, because I'm a firm believer that if we can get many millions of people, tens of millions of people, to think of transhumanism, to think of life extension science as totally normal, the government's money will start flowing into the research. And that will not just be a fraction of that 2% of the federal budget, but will be maybe half of the military budget. Could be $10 trillion at some point over 10 years. Those are the kinds of things that can make us have a science-minded planet, a technology-minded planet, instead of a planet that right now is geared towards dying. It seems insane that it's geared towards dying. I mean, anyone that walks through a cemetery that thinks, wow, you know, here it is. No, this is ridiculous. There are hundreds and hundreds of teams around America right now working on the research to cure aging, to stop aging, to try to eliminate death entirely. Our main goal has to be to take our resources, whatever they are, and try to make it so that those researchers have more and more resources to draw upon. And that way, we can, for once and for all, get rid of death and be able to live as long as we want without the specter of death haunting us all the time. But thanks so much for listening to my speech, and I think we're going to have Ron come back and give it. Thank you. Thank you.